Think about the house you grew up in, not the building, the feeling inside it. Maybe it was loud in ways that should have been quiet. Maybe it was quiet in ways that should have been loud. Maybe the person who was supposed to make you feel safe was the same person you were learning to be afraid of. Maybe nobody hit you, but nobody saw you either. And somehow that silence left marks too. If any of that landed somewhere familiar, this video is going to change the way you understand yourself. Because what happened to you in that house did something to your brain that science is only beginning to fully understand. And it is not what you have been told. Act number 1, the brain that learned to survive. When a child grows up in an environment that is unpredictable, where love is inconsistent, where safety is never guaranteed, where they learn early that the world is not a reliable place, something remarkable happens inside their brain. It adapts, not slowly, not over years, immediately. Researchers at Harvard University's Center on the Developing Child have spent decades studying what they call toxic stress, the prolonged activation of the body's stress response systems in the absence of protective relationships. What they found changed everything we thought we knew about difficult childhoods. A child under chronic stress does not simply suffer. Their brain rewires itself. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes hyperactive, more sensitive, more accurate. It learns to read microsignals that most brains never even register. A shift in tone, a change in someone's breathing, the difference between a door closing normally and a door closing wrong. You were not born with this ability. You built it because you had to. Act number 2, what the science actually says. In 2009, a landmark study published in the journal Child Development followed children from difficult home environments over a 15-year period. They were tracking something specific, not damage, adaptation. What they found was that children who grew up in unpredictable environments developed significantly stronger performance on tasks requiring rapid threat assessment, pattern recognition, and social intelligence. Their brains had essentially been trained. The same neural pathways that formed under stress, the ones that learned to read a room in seconds, the ones that could sense a shift in energy before anyone else noticed, those same pathways translated into something else entirely in adulthood. An ability to read people with uncanny accuracy, an instinct for when something is wrong before anyone has said a word, a sensitivity to human emotion that most people spend decades trying to develop and still never fully reach. Bruce Perry, one of the world's leading experts on childhood trauma and neuroscience, described it in his 2006 book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. He wrote that children who survived difficult early environments often develop what he called a finely tuned social radar, an almost automatic capacity to sense the emotional state of everyone around them. You did not learn empathy in a classroom. You learned it in a house where reading the room was not optional, where knowing what mood someone was in before they walked through the door was the difference between a good evening and a terrible one. That is not damage. That is training, the hardest kind. The kind that does not leave. If this is describing something you have carried for a long time, hit subscribe and drop a heart in the comments right now if you grew up in a home that taught you to read people before you could read books. Act number 3, the hidden superpower. Here's what nobody talks about. The people who grew up in difficult homes, they are often the most emotionally intelligent adults in any room they enter. Not because they read books about empathy, not because they took courses in emotional intelligence, but because they were trained by life itself. In environments where nobody explained their feelings to them, they learned to understand feelings. In homes where communication was broken, they learned to hear what was not being said. In houses where love was unpredictable, they learned to give it consistently, because they knew what its absence felt like. A 2014 study in the journal Cytological Science found that adults who reported difficult childhood experiences scored significantly higher on measures of empathic accuracy, the ability to correctly identify what another person is thinking and feeling, not slightly higher, significantly. The researchers described it as post-traumatic growth, the documented psychological phenomenon where people who survive adversity do not just recover to where they were, they develop capacities they would never have built any other way. Resilience that does not break under pressure.
Creativity forged by having to solve problems nobody else was going to solve for you. Compassion born from knowing what it feels like to not be held. Strength that looks like softness from the outside, but is anything but.
It would be dishonest to tell you this story without the other side of it, because the same sensitivity that makes you extraordinary can also make ordinary life feel unbearable. The hyperactive amygdala that learned to read danger sometimes reads danger where there is none. The radar that kept you safe as a child sometimes fires in a quiet room with people who love you. And the walls you built to survive sometimes keep out the very people trying to reach you. This is not weakness. This is the cost of an adaptation that was built for a world that no longer exists. Your brain learned its lessons so well, it sometimes struggles to believe the lesson is over. Researchers call this hypervigilance, the body staying ready for a threat that stopped coming years ago. And understanding this, really understanding it, is not about excusing your patterns. It is about finally being able to work with, to say, I know why you do this. I know where you learned it, and I know you do not need to do it anymore. You did not choose the house you grew up in. You did not choose what happened inside it, but your brain, without anyone telling it to, chose to survive. And in surviving, it built things, quiet things, invisible things, things that look from the outside like anxiety, like overthinking, like sensitivity, but are actually something far more rare, a mind that understands people deeply, instinctively, in ways that cannot be taught, only live. You did not come through a difficult childhood broken. You came through it forged, and there is a difference. If this video finally gave you a way to understand what your childhood built in you, hit that like and subscribe button right now for more this type of content.